Heat check. Basketball, college. Basketball, college. Oh, that's time already? Whoa.
Welcome into another episode of the Heat Check Hangout, your number one source for all things basketball, college. I'm your host, Brian Ralph, joined as always by my co-host, Connor Hope. Today we are joined by two other members of the Heat Check team, Andy Dieckhoff, Lukas Harkins, bracketologist extraordinaire Lukas Harkins. So we wanted to make sure we have him on to talk about the seedings because we have a bracket. This is our annual bracket reaction and NCAA Tournament preview show, the best one we do all year, most exciting podcast episode I think we do all year, certainly. Before we get into it, I have a bracket in front of me. I have filled it out, and I hate it.
You have a printer in the year 2023?
I do. Some of us have day jobs that require it sometimes. But yeah,
I just go to the office I need a printer.
Looking down the bracket, there are some interesting matchups that we'll get into later on in the episode. But Lukas, we need to start with you in terms of the seeding. 4-1 seeds, I don't think we're any surprise with the maybe chance Houston being over Kansas and getting Kansas City, Alabama, Houston, Kansas, Purdue in that order. Is that how you saw it?
Up until about an hour before the selection show, I had Houston ahead. I went away from it at the end, and I decided after the AAC tournament game to move Kansas into Kansas City. So naturally, I made a gut mistake in the last hour. But in terms of gut mistakes, I've been doing bracketology for 7 or 8 years. In terms of gut mistakes, the mistake on the same seed line is like the best I have had. Mm-hmm. The odds that I do something wrong in the last hour that changes a whole seed happens far too often. So I'm happy with that being my last minute switch this year.
Well, the mistake you made was assuming the committee was going to make a change in the last hour.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, we've seen the results of those Sunday games not matter as much when the committee pretty much has things done.
Yeah.
I want to look at the bubble now because there were some notable teams that got in, particularly Pitt, Mississippi State, Nevada, and Arizona State. Other teams on the other side of the cut line that were hoping to get in, but I think in a year like this, particularly where there were no bid stealers, sorry, you weren't good enough. Is there anybody that you were surprised did not get in?
No.
Or which one of these 4 in the first 4, Mississippi State, Pitt, Arizona State, Nevada, are you surprised maybe to see in the first 4?
So I had Rutgers in the field, and I had Pittsburgh on the outside looking in. But quite frankly, no issue with what they decided. I think the 68 they picked, is the 68 they picked. I think we've got, with no bid stealers this year, it really felt like someone is going to get left out that felt like they should have gotten in, or at least 2 of those teams, when in reality, probably all 6 should have been left out in a normal year. And none of those teams did enough. Like, did NC State do enough to not be in Dayton? No. But that's just the way this season played out, where they were good enough to not be in Dayton. And I think that, they're a quad one team that just totally skipped out on Dayton altogether. They're a pure 11 seed. So it was just kind of one of those years where like there were enough bad bubble teams that there was someone that was going to felt like they were going to fly out. Whether that was going to be a Nevada or a Pitt, a Rutgers, and Oklahoma State, turns out to be the latter 2. This one, but I had no issues with the 68 they selected. I was 67 of 68, which is pretty common in bracketology. I think people get pretty excited about being 67 for 68 when really 65 are almost always locks. But by the time you get there, so like 67 of 68 is pretty normal. But I think there are years where you go 67 out of 68 and you feel like one team really got screwed. And I didn't feel that way this year. I think Rutgers don't go 2-4 in quad 3. It is really just the facts that matter. Oklahoma State, don't lose 12 games out of your 18 quad 1 chances.
I think that's fair. Again, I am in the mindset of this as a tournament to determine the national champion. If you are throwing a fit about not being the 68th team selected, you were not good enough to win the national championship. Like, it's fine. It's just we've expanded it past the point where like there's margin for error. Right, we're way past that point.
You can't tell me when you come out of the bubble that an Oklahoma State team that went 6-12 in quad 1. I don't think you could tell me Nevada couldn't go 2-7 in 9 more opportunities. They went 4-5 in their opportunities they did have. I think that should warrant some. That's kind of how I looked at that matchup. Nevada is the most excited I've ever been about a selection, not because I thought they super deserved to be in, but they weren't in that many bracketology fields, so I'm thrilled that they got in, and I stuck with my gut. And a lot of times that's when I would switch in the last few hours, just because they didn't really have an overwhelming resume, and they weren't a power conference team. I'm thrilled to see Nevada getting in. 4-bid Mountain West comes through, even with New Mexico falling apart on the stretch. 4-bid MWC gets going.
Yeah. Is there anything else seeding wise or matchup wise that surprised you or stuck out to you?
I think Florida Atlantic getting a 9 is pretty against traditional precedent. Those types of teams have often found themselves, like I'm looking at a Wofford, a Buffalo, in like 2019 or so. Those teams ended up on a 7 and a 6 type of line. I had Florida Atlantic on my 7 coming in because that's just what has happened in the past with these teams that, Florida Atlantic's coming into the tournament at 31-3. They've been phenomenal all year. That's the kind of team where there was a huge jumbled mess in the 7 through 10 seeds, I felt, for kind of everybody. And I thought Florida Atlantic would get an edge just by having such an elite record that they'd just be ahead of those teams. Turned out not. They ended up on the 9 line. Apologies to the 1 seed because that's a brutal 9 you just have to pick up. And there kind of felt like Memphis last year for Gonzaga in the second round. Is just kind of a tough kind of matchup. And Texas A&M, I mean, I feel a little – Texas A&M's the other team I was off by 2+ seed lines on, but I feel a little bit like that was more deserved than Florida Atlantic because Florida Atlantic couldn't have done anything else, really. They went 31-3. It's not like they could have done anything else with the schedule they had. And they also can't schedule really that much better. Texas A&M has opportunities to schedule better. It didn't. Its non-conference strength of schedule was not good enough. And while I thought they had a resume of a 5 seed, I don't think being disrespected by a non-conference strength of schedule dropping to a 7 is that out of the realm of possibility, even though most people have them on a 5 or 6. So I think the biggest thing I was thrown off by was FAU as a 9. But overall, I think the committee did a very good job this year. And if you listen to me talk after last year's selection show, that's not something I say every year. I think the committee did a good job this year.
Yeah, last year, if I remember correctly, you were like, the committee did not follow its own rules. This is dumb. Am I correct in that, the way I remember that?
You cut out for me in the middle there.
I was because last year, I think you came on here and you basically said the committee didn't follow its own rules. They're dumb. That was what the reaction was last year, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was annoyed last year, and I stand by it. I still think that part of that was a gut reaction after last year because I didn't do particularly well in projecting the field, but I also still stand by it. It just didn't feel like anything mattered after Wednesday, and I felt that was a message that shouldn't get sent. And I thought that wasn't sent as much this year. I think there were some instances of the games this weekend not mattering as much. Case in point, Kansas versus Houston for the second 2 seed. Going to Houston, I think was an impact there. But also Marquette got a 2 seed. And I think we saw Tennessee not get a 2 seed last year for doing exactly what Marquette did this year. I think to some extent they learned their lesson in that respect. The only thing that's pretty much the same in terms of what the committee did last year versus this year is they put Texas A&M about 2 seed lines lower than everyone expected.
Well, to be fair with Texas A&M, there was a point in late December where they just lost to Wofford and were 6-5 with a couple terrible losses, and we were laughing that Buzz Williams was not going to offer a letter to the committee this year because they were not going to get in. And they did what they needed to do in SEC play, certainly. I think non-conference had a lot to do with that. Connor, I'll let you jump in here. Before we start going region by region, is there any one major thing that sticks out to you?
I mean, Lukas touched on the 2 things that stuck out to me. I would pretty much pick Memphis or FAU over any other 8 or 9 seed if they were matched up against them and they're playing each other. And I think Texas A&M being lower. I do believe they were
the top 8 and the top 9 on the S curve, by the way.
Yeah,
I think Memphis was the top 8 and FAU was the top 9 in the official 1-68, which helps.
And Texas A&M being that low, I think Texas would still win that game, but Texas playing Texas A&M as their 7 is just rough, because you look at all the other 7 seeds. Northwestern is good. They're not Texas A&M. Michigan State is flawed, and we saw it in the Big Ten tournament. Missouri is in the same conference as Texas A&M, is clearly not as good as Texas A&M, and is the same seed line. So Texas, being the best 2 seed in the field, getting a 7 seed that's playing like a 5 seed, that to me is just rough. And I do think we got some fun matchups, though. So I'm excited to talk about these regions, because I think there are some incredibly fun matchups to be had throughout this bracket.
Andy, any major takeaways from you on the bracket as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, one thing in particular, we talked a lot there about Texas A&M and where they ended up being seated. The team on the other side of that matchup, Penn State. Lukas, I know you had them as a 9 in your final bracket going in. Not to point that out, but just do you feel like they were underseeded then, at this point, or I guess put into a kind of a tougher position than maybe they earned, or do you feel like that was pretty consistent with the not rewarding the final weekend too much?
Yeah, I think I wasn't really surprised by Penn State landing on a 10. They were on a 10 for me coming into the weekend. I don't think they were my last 9 seed in my field anyways.
Okay.
So I wasn't too surprised there. I think Illinois probably, if I recall correctly, landed on the 9. But really, the whole 9 seed line, I mean, was a disaster for me. I only got one 9 seed right. Like I had two of my 9s ended up as 8s and one ended as a 10. It was my worst line from projecting wise. I think Penn State landing on a 10 is about right. I mean, to me, I think it's more accurate for Penn State to have been the top of 10 than if they were the top 9, despite me having them on the line. I think they were closer to a 10 than they were like an 8. So I think that the 10's not a bad pick there. I think they should have been a 9 if they were to beat Purdue, and whether or not the committee would have taken that into account, I think would have been a discussion, but they didn't beat Purdue.
Right.
So I think putting him on a 10 makes sense.
Okay.
And quite frankly, if you're a Penn State fan, I think you'd prefer a 10.
Yeah, right. I mean, because you get that team, and you get a team like Texas A&M that maybe, like you said, shouldn't be on the 7 line, but your path from there gets a little easier, not having to face a 1 seed. I mean, my other big takeaway is I love all these 5-12 matchups. I'm so excited for all of these. I think they should be pretty great. I'm looking at this. One that sticks out to me that I think will just be on a lot of people's minds is Duke Oral Roberts, right? I mean, you've got one of the biggest brands in college basketball, going in Duke versus Oral Roberts, who, we saw what they could do a couple of years ago. Getting Max Asmus on this big of a stage and now in the 5-12 matchup, not in that sneaky 2-15, I think it'll be really cool to see if Oral Roberts can do it again.
I'm ready for
if Oral Roberts, I think if Oral Roberts got a team other than Duke, that's a very easy pick. But Duke is one of those teams that is playing its best basketball this season coming in, and they're finally healthy. They've been dealing with injuries. That East region is one that's really interesting. We'll go ahead and start there as we go region by region here. Purdue's the 1 seed. They'll play Texas Southern in the first round. They have that Memphis FAU game 8-9, Duke Oral Roberts the 5-12, Tennessee Louisiana the 4-13, 6-11 is Kentucky and Providence.
The Bryce Hopkins
3-14 is Kansas State, Montana State. 7-10 is Michigan State USC, and then the 2-15 is Marquette and Vermont. To me, this is the region that I already have the most scribbles out on for picks. I've gone through it, and I can probably see 4 or 5 different teams winning the region, and none of them are Purdue, the top seed. So, Connor, as you're wearing a Purdue hat, am I right in that thinking?
I don't have Purdue through to the second weekend, so yeah. I think they got a brutal 8-9 matchup, no matter who they play, right? Because Memphis has the athleticism and the length and the point guard
and the
play.
press.
Yeah. to absolutely manhandle that Duke backcourt or that Purdue backcourt. Duke is big, but they also have the guard play. FAU as a mid-major, Golden is 7-1, not as big as Edie, but pretty damn close, and they're pretty efficient. Like that top of that region for Purdue is brutal. Like they have to hope probably get FAU, and then of the 2 single-digit seeds, probably Tennessee, and then you get to the bottom, and like I don't know. We heard Shaka Smart describe Marquette's defense as violence, and I'm not sure Purdue can handle a violent defense at all. So I have a hard time. I can see a path for every single 1 seed except for Purdue. Like they would be like talk about surprise. I'd be shocked if Purdue made it out of this region. That's all I'm going to say. Like we knew they were going to have a tough go of it, being the 4th 1 seed. But I didn't expect them to give them like this as their reward for being a 1 seed. So
we've talked about it all week because we've seen Purdue just wilt anytime they were pressed late in a game. And
not just Purdue. Literally any team with a Big Ten logo on his jersey.
Yeah,
we saw Penn State yesterday.
Don't give them Memphis. A team like Memphis that presses is going to really give them problems. And Memphis would have to beat FAU, and Purdue has to beat Texas Southern or Fairleigh Dickinson. There's a playing game. But yeah, like Andy, we talked about that.
Talk about.
Go ahead, Connor.
I texted this to my brother and my dad. Purdue won the Big Ten championship. It was probably the most worrying conference championship run I have ever seen in my life.
Yes.
Right? They went through a Rutgers team that's in the first 4 out and struggled with them. They went through an Ohio State team that's not even sniffing the NCAA tournament, and they struggled with them. They were up 17 on a 10-seed Penn State and let them back into the point where they relied on a Penn State travel with half a second left to prevent them from getting off a shot to win it. Like that, this is a Purdue team that's deeply flawed. They have a bunch of good wins, and I think we're giving this team far too much credit at this point, or anyone who brings them through to the Final Four is probably giving them far too much credit for what they did in November. Beating a Duke team that was flawed at the time and is now not the same Duke team. Beating a Gonzaga team that couldn't hold the ball and is not the same Gonzaga team as they were in November. Like, you look at those early results, and and they've earned the 1 seed. I'm not saying that, but over the last 3 to 4 weeks, if you've watched Purdue play, if they go up against Memphis or FAU, but if they go up against Memphis, those guards are going to go through hell. And they can't rely on David Jenkins and they can't rely on David Jenkins to save the day anymore, right? David Jenkins had the best 3 games of his entire season against those 3 teams they played in the Big Ten tournament. And so Foster Lawyer has to figure out how to make an impact when he's not scoring. Fletcher Lawyer has to figure out.
If he played like Foster Lawyer for a little bit.
If you give Purdue Foster, I feel pretty good about them getting through Memphis and FAU.
Fletcher Lawyer has to figure out a way to make an impact when he's not scoring. Braden Smith has to figure out a way to not throw the ball away. Honestly, the guard, and I know I was down on this guard previously, but the guard I feel the best about heading into this tournament for Purdue is Newman. And that's because his defense has been incredible. But outside of that, like I don't know. Maybe I'm being too down on Purdue, but that Big Ten championship run, like it gave me nothing to go on in terms of being optimistic at all heading into the NCAA tournament.
You go ahead, Andy.
Well, I was just going to say, we're talking about these second round matchups that Purdue might run into. How about a potential Texas Southern run? I mean, this is Johnny Jones' 6th tournament now? See a visible side there from Lukas. Hey, I'm just saying, and maybe it's because, I got a little close to Grambling, and now I just think that Texas Southern is, completely unbeatable. But they are one of those dangerous teams. I don't think they're actually going to beat Purdue or anything like that. But just, kudos to them for making a pretty cool run here. And we're probably not going to talk about them too much more, but to lose 20 games and then end up in the NCAA tournament is pretty awesome. So shout out to them. I may not have been celebrating as much as I normally would for a 20-win team after writing a big feature saying how Grambling wanted to make their first ever tournament. But still, really, really cool. And, again, it's a coach who's been to this tournament now 3 years in a row, by the way, for Texas Southern. But he also made it once with LSU, Johnny Jones did, and twice with North Texas back there. So, it's a guy who's been to the tournament a lot, never been, past the first round, but, who's counting?
That play-in game, or the first 4 game, by the way, you have Texas Southern who lost 20 games against Fairleigh Dickinson, who did not win their conference tournament. Like, that's as first foray as the first 4 can get.
I'm on board with Purdue, though. I'm not getting. I think there's been too much Purdue slander in this conversation.
Okay, so how far do you think Purdue will go, Lucas?
No. I didn't say that I was picking them far. I've just said there's too much slander for Purdue in this case.
You're saying they're not going to get UMBC'd. I get it.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Zach Edey has rightfully had one of the best seasons in the country. I think there's something to be said for you get that. Let's say they get that press Memphis matchup. It'll be Memphis's second game in 3 days. In terms of how much legs they're going to have for that press against Purdue, can they run it for as much as they might need to? And I think Purdue's a really, really, really good basketball team. I think that they're certainly capable of making the Final Four. I think they're certainly capable of making an Elite Eight, which would be the first time for Purdue since 2019. I think that's kind of what you're hoping for Purdue is to get on that, kind of get back on the right track in terms of NCAA tournament results. They went first round, Sweet 16, Elite Eight, and since COVID, it's a first round and a Sweet 16. Can they get another run to that Elite Eight? I think would be a nice step. Particularly in a year when they've earned a number 1 seed. I think they've had a really good year. I think they're a team that I think a lot of people are going to pick to go out early, and it kind of feels like that team that doesn't go out early, like just kind of happens to be the opposite of what people are thinking is going to happen there. I could see them making a run.
And I think part of it too, I mean, if you look at, and I know, especially later in the tournament, location doesn't matter as much, but do you think that people who are just showing up to watch games that don't have a rooting interest in Columbus, Ohio, or Michigan State fans who actively have a rooting interest against Purdue in Columbus, Ohio, aren't just going to be all over Memphis or FAU in that second round game?
Does Michigan State have a rooting interest against Purdue?
Well, I'd assume so.
I've never really seen them as big rivals, and I thought that would be just a root for your conference type of thing. Like,
yeah. Only the SEC
I
does
grew up
that.
a Wisconsin fan. I pretty much my entire family will definitely root for Purdue in that game, regardless, just because root for your conference.
Fair.
Lucas, we've talked about some second round matchups and moving further, but this first round, what are some upset picks, and maybe give us the upset pick you're most confident in that first round?
Are we still talking in the East or overall?
In the East.
Nothing.
No first round.
I don't know
upset?
about anything. Like Oral Roberts Duke is the popular one, but like I don't really like it all that much either. Like I think you'd have to go deeper into that field to a Memphis, Florida Atlantic over Purdue kind of thing, or I can easily see Kentucky making an Elite Eight run for sure.
Connor, Andy, do you guys see a first round upset?
I agree with Lucas that I don't like
I
any
wouldn't
of
count
these.
a 10-7 as a major upset.
No,
either. I don't think
no.
USC.
I'm looking
Michigan State
11-6 or wider, and the only one that I'm not even – I wouldn't even say I'm confident, but the only one that I could see myself picking by the end of the day is Louisiana over Tennessee. But then again, Tennessee's blown out every team that's at Louisiana's level or worse by like a large margin every single game they've played. So this is probably one of those situations where I'm going to go favorite in every game with the exception of probably, seed line favorite in every game, with the exception of probably that Michigan State USC game. I'll probably pick USC, but I'm biased, so disregard my Michigan State USC takes.
Andy?
I mean, if I had to say one that I sort of want to see, I mean, I'm a big Sky guy, so I would love to see Montana State kind of keep it going and pull that off there. I'm not sure how possible that will be, though. I think Jerome Tang will have Kansas State ready for the Bobcats. Let's see if, I guess I'll just be lame and say the Oral Roberts one, but, now that with all the talk you guys, kind of prefaced it with, I feel like, a jerk picking it. But, yeah, I'll say Oral Roberts over Duke. My dad will disown me for that pick, but, yeah, I don't know why not. And I think, one of the things Oral Roberts people might not realize right off the bat, especially, more casual fans of it. Last time they had Max Asmus and, Kevin O'Banner. This time, a really important guy is 7'3" Connor Vanover. 7'3", 7'5"?
7'5".
Right, okay, thank you. Super, super tall guy who can also step out and shoot the three a little bit, right? And, just swat things around. I think that's an interesting thing that not a lot of 12 seeds will have, most years. And that does sort of, match up well with Duke's, formidable front court there with Lively and Filipowski. So, I think there's some potential there. And then obviously Max Asmus is just an absolute superstar. So, I think
that's California. That's California legend, Connor Vanover. Give him the proper West Coast respect.
Yes, and also Arkansas legend, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, but I got to go a little bit further back.
Sure.
I think the Montana State team actually matters more for the second round matchup than it does for the first, because Montana State is a bowling ball of a team. Like those games are physical as hell, and you're taking Kentucky against Providence, and Kentucky goes against Providence and then gets Kansas State coming off a game against that front court of Montana State. Kentucky's going to take that every day, because if Kansas State went up against a Grand Canyon, for example, or a UC Santa Barbara or something like that, like those games are high level. Those teams are high level. They're just not. They're not as physical.
Fun of a matchup there.
What?
I would have loved to see UCSB against Kansas State. Would have been a really
that
fun
would have been
matchup.
fun. But I'm talking about from the Kentucky's perspective,
Yeah,
getting a Kansas State team coming off a matchup against a great Osibor and Jabril Bello, like Kentucky's going to take that every day, because Kansas is going to be bruised after that one. And I think Kentucky's game against Providence, while it might be closer, I just don't see the same level of physicality that Montana State's going to bring to Kansas State.
The only one I have is Louisiana over Tennessee. And I understand Tennessee is blowing out everybody that they've faced, and I feel a little hesitant, but I am so out on Tennessee and have been for a while. And
Were you ever in on Tennessee?
No, he was not.
No. And Louisiana has some high major talent, particularly Jordan Brown. So I think that's a tricky matchup for Tennessee, and one I think they could easily overlook. And they have not looked the best since Ziegler got hurt, unless they were playing South Carolina, which, everybody but Kentucky apparently beats up on South Carolina, so that's fine. Lukas, who wins the region? Who comes out of the bracket?
Don't make me say it. You know what I have to say, and I don't want to say it.
Say it.
Say it.
Marquette.
You said it.
Marquette.
Say it louder.
No, I don't want to say it louder. I'm a Wisconsin and a Butler fan. I can't say it louder. That's the best.
Marquette.
That's the team that plays my Vermont. The team that plays my Vermont Catamounts in the first round. That team.
I'm sort of surprised you didn't pick that. Just out of spite.
Yeah.
I thought about it. Dylan Penn and Robin Duncan, the Evansville natives out there in Columbus. Watch out, Catamounts are coming.
Connor, how about for you?
No, I think it's that team.
I've been going back and forth between Duke and Marquette. Marquette.
Yeah, it's tough.
Marquette. I think it's Marquette and it's not necessarily that I trust them more. I think they are.
Can't trust Marquette.
I think
heard that.
Someone had to say it.
I think Marquette has a clearer path to the Elite Eight because Duke's going to have to go through either a Memphis or a Purdue team that could match up with their bigs and match up with them athletically. Well, Memphis can match up with them athletically. Purdue obviously can match up with their bigs. Marquette just looks so good right now. They just look they look the part of one of the top 4 teams in the country right now.
Let me tell you, I don't like Marquette. I've never liked Marquette, just out of spite. I grew up a Wisconsin fan. Then I went to Butler. The odds that I was going to like Marquette ever are low. But God darn it is so hard not to like watching Tyler Kolek play basketball.
So good.
He's so good. The team is really good. I mean, I listened to the presser after Marquette won at Butler because I was at the game and covered the media for that one. Shaka Smart's tremendous to listen to. It's just like every single thing that comes out of his mouth and out of that Marquette team's mouth, whether it's Tyler Kolek's F-him after being picked 9th, or as Connor already referenced, Shaka Smart referring to Marquette's defense as violent. They just ooze confidence.
Yeah.
They're going to be really hard to peg against with the way they're playing right now. And I know that oftentimes end of season momentum doesn't necessarily carry over into the NCAA tournament, but they've been really good and really good for a long time.
Yeah. Andy?
Yeah, I believe in Purdue. I think a little bit more than anybody else in here does. But I'm not positive that
Says the guy who brought up Texas Southern.
Handle Shaka Smart's defense coming at them. I do think it's gonna end up chalk in the Elite Eight matchup there, but. And I'll be honest, when I came on here, I think I had Purdue penciled in there. I think I've been talked into Marquette here. I think maybe, but I will say I do believe, and especially after these next few days, Purdue is going to hear a lot of crap being talked about them. I think that could be one of those underrated motivating factors for a team. Nobody wants to be called the worst 1 seed and, be the team that everybody predicts to drop out of the field before the second weekend. And at this time of year, take whatever chip on your shoulder you can find. And I think there will be plenty for Purdue to find in that department. So I think they'll get to the Elite Eight, but I'll stop them short there, and I'll rock with everyone else here and go with Marquette and Shaka Smart back to the Final Four.
Brian, do you remember when I said that Shaka Smart couldn't win with 5 stars? Is Stevie Mitchell the only top 100 recruit on Marquette? And is Stevie Mitchell was he a top 100 recruit in 21? Because I feel like he just wins with players that Marquette loves to play together, but he wins with players that are willing to buy into his system, are willing to play as a team. Never really got that at Texas, but like this Marquette team.
I think David Joplin was top 100, wasn't he?
Was he?
At least was there for a while.
I don't know. I just know that this team.
Cam Jones was 107.
He was 84 on 247, but he was 124 on the composite.
Okay.
That's so I have
pride of Brookfield, Wisconsin, David Joplin. Shout out!
I have Marquette in the Elite Eight.
Don't you dare say
I
those
think
4
the
letters.
winner of the region is whoever wins the Memphis Duke Sweet 16 matchup.
The disrespect for the Purdue Boilers on this hangout is absurd.
Memphis is going to press Purdue, and Purdue's going to be down 20 as soon as they do it. Like it's going to happen. And it's an awful matchup. It's an awful matchup. It's an awful matchup for Purdue. You know what? I got to put my money where
Dude, I can't tell my in-laws cousins who went to Purdue anything about to listen to this at all.
Eli's not going to post this.
Oh yeah, Eli's just going to leave it. I didn't even think about our fearless leader.
Lucas, how do
I
you
have
feel?
said
I have a
all
text
year-
message with two Purdue grads actually, because I'm in a text message from my brother and one of his best friends. Geez, at least we're not like Greg Waddell, who has four second weekend Big Ten teams, and none of them are Purdue.
I have said all year that feels like this tournament is primed for a Kemba type run, and Kendrick Davis was the most likely to do that.
Oh, sure.
And things set up pretty well for him. As we go to the South region, does that mean I have a Memphis-San Diego State matchup in the Final Four? Maybe. That doesn't feel good.
This South region is extremely fun. Can I just point that out? This South region is so fun.
Yes. It's a blast.
Let's jump in there, Connor. Why is it so fun? What makes it so fun?
Is there a bad matchup outside of like Princeton, Arizona, and Alabama versus whoever they play in this region? Like a matchup that maybe Virginia, just because it's Virginia basketball, but like I feel like every other region has a matchup or two where you're just like, I don't want to watch that game. And I don't feel like I have that same opinion of the South region. I think the best first round game on the entire bracket for me, in my opinion, is in the South region. So I just think it's going to be extremely fun. I think it sets up to be a little bit chalky, but I think it's going to be extremely fun.
Yeah, quite frankly, the game I'm least interested in is Maryland, West Virginia, which is a good basketball game, like a really good basketball game. I think that's 10 on top 25 teams, and it's the game I'm like least interested in watching.
I think it's one of the first games of the tournament too.
Yeah.
On that Thursday, if I remember.
I think it's the first game.
Oh wow.
Isn't it?
All right, so Lucas is sleeping in on Thursday, I guess.
I am most certainly not. I'll be awake. I'm tired enough. I will catch up on sleep the next 3 days.
There you go.
Andy,
The best part about March Madness is Utah State, Boise State doesn't start at 12:30.
Thank goodness. Andy, what first round matchup sticks out most to you for a potential upset or just overall intrigue?
Well, I think, that Virginia-Furman matchup is interesting. Obviously, Virginia's got a little bit of a dotty history in the first round, but, obviously it's been, 4 or 5 years now. We can't hold that against them anymore. But I like what this Furman team does. Sorry, 1 second here. Jalen Slauson and Mike Bothwell are just, two really high-level guys. I don't think you really want to get into a game where you're trading baskets with Furman. So,
Can Virginia trade baskets?
What's that? Well, exactly. That's why you don't want to get into that, because we don't know what the trade looks like there. What is the conversion rate? But I kind of tend to agree with Connor that this one might end up being a little chalky. If I had to rock and really lock into a first round, like a double-digit seed winning, it would probably be Utah State. But that's, it's a 10, it's a cop-out. But
they're a 4-point favorite on Ken Baum.
Utah State, Missouri is the best first round game in the tournament. Just from a pure excitement perspective, 2 top 15 offenses going up against each other.
Blast.
And people finally realizing how good Stephen Ashworth is. I think that's going to be
yes.
fun.
And winner gets Arizona.
Yeah.
Second round game is going to be a blast too.
Well, and Arizona, potential for Arizona Baylor, all offense, no defense. Like that section of the bracket is going to be so good.
Incredible. Or you either get Creighton or Turk in the second round against Baylor.
I love it. Yeah.
This region is electric.
It is. Again, I don't know I don't know exactly what kind of upsets we might see in the first round, but yeah, the first round up and down. I mean, we haven't even talked about San Diego State and Charleston.
You're right.
The most picked upset of the first round.
It will
probably
be
by public.
It will be.
It'll probably be
which it shouldn't be, but
Well,
It shouldn't be,
okay,
but
I was going to
probably
ask,
right.
how do you guys feel about that one? Do you feel, because I think people are going to see the 12, they're going to see the 30, 31, whatever it is now, by Charleston.
And they know Charleston.
You call them.
Charleston got so much national attention,
Right.
right?
And Kelce really made himself into a celebrity here, you know?
Yeah, but as Connor has pointed out a couple times in this podcast, their analytics and all their metrics kind of stink. Like there was a question if they were going to get in the tournament if they did not win the CAA.
Right. I mean, they're a 12. They're not. You know, they got through. They won. They won their conference tournament. They didn't pick up any more losses, and they were still rewarded with a 12. So that kind of tells you right there that they weren't going to get into this tournament if they picked up another loss in the Colonial, which is a little interesting. I mean, maybe there's a difference here between seeding and selection going on that might be a little bit of a false positive there, but yeah, it's not like Charleston took care of their business and now they're on the 9 line.
They aren't Florida Atlantic.
Right.
aren't.
They're just not. So yeah, I think
this region, from an offensive perspective. Sorry for interrupting you, Andy. But
you're fine.
Baylor at 2.
I mean, you got to start with Virginia if you're going to talk offense in this region.
But Ken Palm's adjusted offenses. It has Baylor number 2, Arizona number 4. It has Missouri at number 10. It has Utah State at 13, West Virginia at 15. It has Alabama at 19. It has I think Furman at 33, Maryland at 35. Like some high-level offenses. Even Corpus Christi, one of the first 4 16 seeds, is like 137 or something like that. How
about this for you, Connor?
What?
How about this for you, Connor? Adjusted tempo of teams in the NCAA tournament. Alabama 4, SEMO 7, Arizona 9, Memphis is 17. So that's the top 3 are in this region. Charleston is 29. That's the 4th. Oral Roberts is 38th. I mean, it's loaded with tempo. This region is absolutely loaded with tempo. Even Utah State's just outside the top 100 in tempo.
Yeah.
Like NC State's in that mix. There is so much speed and offense in this region that is going to be unbelievable. And also, if Virginia makes it run, it is going to be a battle of contrasting styles in every single matchup, unless San Diego State.
Yep.
It's entertaining. Alabama, top overall seed. There's some talk about them having a fairly easy draw. I don't find that to be the case. I actually think there are some really strong middle seeds in this region. Is this Bama's to lose, Connor, or is there a matchup that could trip them up along the way?
The only matchup that it's Bama's to lose. Like the only matchup that I could potentially see giving them issues, and it's the matchup I have in the Elite Eight, is like, does Baylor finally figure it out defensively? Because we know Arizona's not. We know that San Diego State's offense, Virginia's offense, they're gonna run. They're gonna keep it close with Bama for about 25 minutes. But their offenses just aren't consistent enough, aren't high scoring enough to go a full 40. And so Baylor, it's like, are we that far out on Baylor's defense, or can they keep it close with Alabama? And I also think that Baylor and Alabama have the 2 best options for you have the best player on the court who's just going to take over the game and win it for you in this region. I have Bama pretty easily through to the Final Four in this one, but if they lose, it will be because Baylor and specifically because Scott Drew's done it before. He's won it all before, that I think would trip Bama up. But I don't think it's an easy region, but I think Bama matches up well, given the fact that the only chance they have at contrasting styles is that Sweet 16 game against San Diego State or Virginia. I feel like Bama's just going to run rampant through that. And they're playing, justified or not, they're playing with a kind of everyone hates us now, so fuck them mindset. And for a team that already had the ceiling as high as Bama did, I feel like that's just not something you want to get in the way of.
Yeah, there is no doubt that Bama's best is better than anybody else's best. And we've seen that time and time again. We've also seen time and time again that they don't always get their best,
but
give their best.
But we've
right?
seen that their worst might be better than every other team in this region except for Baylor.
Except for that Oklahoma game.
Yeah. But they were facing Oklahoma
They do have that Oklahoma
at
game.
their best. I'm talking about
Yeah,
Baylor
oh,
doesn't
yeah,
have-
yeah.
Baylor doesn't have to play Iowa State. They're fine.
So
the championship
I
game.
think that
Baylor,
San Diego
Iowa
State
State.
matchup is a problem for Alabama. Bama is vulnerable, and they don't play their best when they don't shoot the three well because of how just reliant they are on shooting threes, and they turn the ball over a good deal. San Diego State is excellent at limiting 3-point attempts, contesting threes, and forcing turnovers. To me, if San Diego State can get past Charleston and get past, I have Furman, but get past the Virginia Furman winner, to me, that is a low-key potential bracket shake-up game because of the way I think San Diego State's defense matches up with Alabama. Now, San Diego State might not be able to score enough to keep up with what Alabama's going to do offensively anyway. But to me, that is the roadblock here. And I actually think Arizona has some potential slip-ups in the Sweet 16 as well. I think that's where this region, the start of the second weekend in the Sweet 16, is going to get really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think to harken back to Eli again, one of his tournament index features has been the value of preseason rankings and how just having that talent coming into the year has in the past somehow correlated to success. I'm not a mathematician. I'll let Eli handle that. But I know that's part of the credit for things, and I think that makes Creighton the most dangerous 6th seed in the country.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So who do you have coming out of the region?
Well, that's a good question. Now, I will say it seems to me like Arizona is such a tough team to peg down because there's enough talent and the pieces are there that they could make somebody could tell me, Arizona's a Final Four team, and I would be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. They're a really good team. But I could also see them losing in the first round or the second round or Sweet 16. They're at every step I could also talk myself out of Arizona. I think part of that comes back to Kirk Kriisa a little bit and his sort of streakiness, if we want to call it that, and just kind of when he's on, it's incredible. And Arizona seems unbeatable at times. When he's not, you're like, how is this a top team? I don't know. Arizona, I'm just going to throw out that they could potentially get through this, or they could go out very, very early. I was with Connor. I have this Alabama-Baylor matchup that I keep going back and forth on in the Elite Eight. My gut reaction was to pencil in Baylor, just because I think mostly of the Scott Drew has been here and done this more, and that I do think Alabama has a little bit of that streakiness in them as well. At this point, that's what I've got. So I'm not totally convinced of it. We're talking about this 2 hours after the bracket came out. So I'll probably make a few different decisions before it all starts again. But at this moment, I do have Baylor getting through. But I'm not super confident about it.
Lucas, who's your pick?
I'm taking Bama.
There you go.
Okay.
Just
Fair enough.
Go straight chalk with Alabama here. There's just too much. Arizona, I really like Utah State, so I think there's just too much possibility there. But I'm not going to risk a Final Four pick on a team that I'm pretty concerned could go out in the first weekend. Baylor's defense concerns me tremendously. Creighton's consistency concerns me. Virginia and San Diego State, I just Furman and Charleston are not easy first-round matchups for either of them. I think Alabama just has the safest path and is the best team.
Connor?
Bama over Baylor.
Okay. Every year there is one region that gets a little chaotic. And the East, depending on what happens with Purdue, certainly can be that region. For me, this is the region that gets chaotic in the Sweet 16. I have San Diego State beating Creighton in the Elite Eight. Oof. I think Bama and Arizona both get there, but Creighton is a bad matchup for Arizona, and I think San Diego State is the only team that could potentially cause Alabama to slip up.
You are so stubborn, Brian. So stubborn.
I am, and it's terrible. It's awful, and I hate it. But I'm also looking it up here because, like, over the last month and a half, San Diego State has been a top 3 team in the country on Torvik because they figured out their offense and they ranked ahead of Alabama in the last 3-4 weeks. They've figured it out offensively, but they can still win without being great offensively. I am stubborn. It's going to come back to bite me in the ass when Charleston beats them in the first game, just like I had Colorado State in the Final Four last year, and they lost in the first matchup with Michigan. It's going to happen.
You did what last
However, I had Colorado State in the Final Four last year, which was looking great. Was looking great for 20 minutes, and the path was there. One of these Mountain West teams is doing it.
Just going to inform you that when we get to talking about the West, Brian has
overdue.
Michigan game like the first game of the day or something.
It was in the first window, yeah. And Colorado State was up 15 at one point, and then Frankie Collins decided to have the only good minutes of his Michigan career.
Oh man.
Anyways,
the joys of March.
Let's go over to the Midwest that Houston's in, right? I have that
the Drake Final Four region? Yeah.
Wait, sorry, Brian, 1 second. I have a question.
Whoa!
I heard that you had San Diego State and Creighton in the Elite Eight. Who won that game?
When they already played?
San Diego State. He said San Diego
State.
Yeah, San Diego State winning that game.
Okay. I just wasn't sure who you actually had going through on there. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. No, I have on that side of the bracket, I have a San Diego State Memphis Final Four matchup, and I hate myself.
Wow. Okay. I love it.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's get to the Drake Final Four region.
The Midwest region. Houston, pretty favorable draw. We've talked about 8-9 matchups. Iowa Auburn does not impress me at all. From either one of those teams being able to do anything. Lukas, you called this a Drake Final Four region. Is Drake making the Final Four?
Future Final Four team, Drake Bulldogs. Yeah.
2023 or at some point?
Okay, so I'm mostly messing around. But in 2018, I spent way too much time laboring over the Miami-Loyola 6-11 matchup, thinking I was going to outsmart everybody. I'm going to take Miami while everybody takes Loyola to win that game. And then Loyola made the Final Four. I'm thinking about doing the same thing here. And just a lot of people are going to like Drake in this matchup. They're super experienced. Plus, they have Tucker DeVries. I'm going to probably take Miami for the same reason I took Miami 5 years ago.
Miami's guards, man.
And I just when Drake makes the Final Four and I picked Miami in the first round, I'm ready for it.
No, I'm excited for the slugfest of a Sweet 16 game between Kent State and Houston.
Ooh.
Hey,
I love it. Go
I
Flash.
don't hate that.
Yes.
I don't either.
I don't hate that at all. I honestly think, depending on the health of Norchad Omir's ankle, very possible.
This kind of reminds me
Very
of that.
possible.
I want to say Kansas State, Wisconsin, Oregon pod in that same upper right a few years ago. The Oregon Sweet 16 run. I think it was UC Irvine, Wisconsin, Kansas State, Oregon. Kind of reminds me of that sort of upper region.
And to remind you guys, to remind listeners, Kent State already played Houston this year in Houston. Neither team crossed
close.
50.
5-point game, right?
Yeah, and Kent State started
5-point
off
game?
on like up 20-13 or something like that.
There is some tournament index. If you're a Heat Check Plus subscriber, has Kent State as a early Cinderella watch team.
Yeah,
Pretty
I
good.
like that matchup with them in Indiana in the first round, Brian. I know you're
we're out on
Indiana.
We're out on Indiana as well. Although I really like Jalen Hood-Schifino, so I'm a little torn with that.
Okay.
But I'm filling out my bracket, which is things I've held true all season long, and I am terrified because it's resulted in the San Diego State-Memphis Final Four matchup. But
Oh man,
I don't trust Indiana to deliver. What really interests me about this region in particular is the bottom half. Because if you look at the two pods in the bottom half, I think you have probably the weakest pod, which it has Iowa State, winner of Pitt, Mississippi State, Xavier, and Kennesaw, with potentially the strongest pod with A&M, Texas A&M, Penn State, Texas, and Colgate.
For tournament index people,
That bottom pod,
Xavier, I believe Eli said, has the easiest draw of any team in tournament index history.
yeah. Yep.
You make me
Like,
praise
Xavier is
too on
vulnerable.
this
They're kind of like
podcast.
Baylor Light, where they have a good offense and their defense is suspect. But I don't think anybody potential matchup Iowa State, Pitt, Mississippi State, or Kennesaw State can expose their defense and like can benefit from that. So like I think Xavier not sleepwalks, but in the Sweet 16 and it doesn't really break a sweat, but also didn't really prove anything.
And then they get booty ball in the Sweet 16.
You're taking booty ball in the Sweet 16.
No, if you're looking at teams that can exploit Xavier's defense, though, Penn State's right there. So is Texas.
That
obviously.
matchup, the Texas A&M Penn State matchup, to me is a very interesting contrast of styles because you have the physical nature that A&M wants to play and the just wide open, spaced out booty ball game that Penn State wants to play.
It's the best quote of the year.
It really is.
It's so good.
I picked Penn State to win that game, Andy, and that's one of those things I think A&M scares me more moving forward, but I also think Penn State does better in that matchup.
Yeah,
Am I wrong for thinking that?
no, I have Penn State right now, and I think it would be, if we're looking for a Kemba Light pick, Jalen Pickett, you could do a lot worse than that, for a guy who might be able to take over games and be that guy. As a 10 seed, I'm not exactly sure how far they can actually get. I'm not trying to put them as national champion or anything like that, but I think he's the kind of guy who can drag you to a second weekend when you maybe shouldn't have gotten there.
Yeah. Somebody did pick them in our Final Four draft. It was me. I picked them.
Ooh.
For that reason. Pickett's got that potential.
Right.
They also did something
Lukas-
that Xavier only did once this year, and that's beat Butler.
Little Butler shout.
Yeah,
Selection
gotta
Sunday.
include Butler in this as much as we can. Lucas, what's the first round matchup that intrigues you the most?
Indiana, Kent State. Partially because I love Kent State, and half of all my in-laws are Indiana fans, so it's going to be a blast of a matchup. So that one's the one I'm probably most intrigued by. I think that's going to be very fun. Kent State's going to be a blast. I think I have not had more fun watching a team in college basketball this year more than watching Penn State. So every single game they watch is much-watched basketball for me. I love that Penn State team. Just for the sheer vibes of rooting on Velveeta Tristan Freeman in the first four of Mississippi State Pitt. Man, I want Pitt to win a game or two. It would just be so much fun for him. He's had a long journey as a Pitt fan.
Yeah.
I'm all in. By the way, it's Sunday. This is my third time in 4 days mentioning Tristan on a podcast.
I love it.
Lucas loves Tristan. I
texted me
also
like
don't
20
want to
minutes
see
ago in this
Mississippi
call.
State. I don't want to see Mississippi State's offense any more than I have to. So like if Pitt could beat them, that would be great. Get them out of here early. Connor, who do you have going through this? Like who is it? Houston's draw sets it pretty well. Is it theirs to lose? Are they the pretty heavy favorite for you to get through, or how do you see it shaking out?
I mean, I'm just as stubborn as you, Brian. I have a Houston Xavier matchup in the Elite Eight. I think Xavier makes it through their pod, and then I think it becomes somewhat of a 3-point shootout between them and Texas, or as close to a 3-point shootout as Texas can get into. Xavier's top 5 in the country in 3-point percentage. Sule Boom is a star, but then they're going to run into Houston. And as long as Marcus Sasser is fully healthy, and groin injuries can be tricky, I have Houston through to the Final Four.
Andy?
Yeah, I'm the same way. As long as Houston is at full strength, I'm rocking with Houston in this bracket. One thing I'm noticing though, looking at it, it's very interesting that out of the 4 teams in Division I who call their home in Iowa, you've got 3 of them in this bracket. You got Iowa, Drake, and Iowa State there. Pretty fun. So I
Doesn't
don't really
get much
know.
more Midwest than Iowa.
Right, exactly. This is the most Midwestern bracket. Plus, you got Indiana, Kent State, Xavier. I mean, it's a very, very Midwestern bracket. Well, one thing that I will kind of throw out there is that I don't think anyone. It doesn't sound like anyone is at all in love with this Iowa State team. I wasn't very much in love with Iowa State going into last year's tournament either. I'm worried a little bit that they're going to, do some stupid stuff again. And
Baylor's in the other region.
What's that?
Baylor's in another region.
That's a good point. Yeah, I don't know, man. I just, just keep your eye on TJ Otzelberger down there. You never quite know. After last year, I'm leery of those guys. But no, I have Houston.
I think they had 10 quad 1 wins. They could beat good teams for sure.
Right.
Lucas, what about for you?
Final Four because Drake have already versed. No.
Yes.
No, but I think I like Drake a lot. I like Kent State a lot, and as a result, I think Houston has to be the pick. I just think they're going to have an easier path. I think that they've been the best team in the country for a long period in analytics. I think that they're going to they've known how to beat teams of the caliber that is on their upper side of the bracket throughout this year, and I think I like teams like a Xavier and a Penn State a bit too much to keep Texas from making the Elite Eight for sure. So from a safety standpoint, kind of same way as Alabama, safety standpoint, Houston.
Yeah, to me the Elite Eight matchup between Houston and Texas, and I think both get there, determines the national champion. Like I really wish they were on opposite sides of the bracket so they could play in the championship game. I really like Texas, and their draw is kind of brutal.
I agree.
The multitude of playmakers, multitude of ball handlers, size, prove they can come back in games. They have more quad 1 wins than anybody in the country other than Kansas. Sasser's injury scares me a little bit. Also, who was Houston beaten this year?
Memphis.
Right. Close. Like, we mentioned the Kent State game. That was a 5-point win against a 13 seed. They beat Oregon by 10. They blew out Oral Roberts. That might be like their most impressive one of the season. They beat St. Mary's, who we'll get to in a little bit, by 5. Beat Virginia, who I have losing in the first round. And then it's close wins over Memphis. I came into today and tonight expecting to have Houston in the championship game and fill everything else out off of that. But looking deeper, yeah,
love it.
It works so well with Gonzaga the last 2 years. But looking deeper at it, and the way I felt about Texas for most of the year. I remember we had I think it was on the preseason podcast where me and Connor, we were talking about Big 12, and I made the comment where, like, if everything clicks for Texas, they can win the championship because they have the pieces that make it work if everything clicks. And this was off of last year where nothing clicked for them. I think things are clicking for Texas. I like Marcus Carr. I like the combination of him and Tyrese Hunter, having Serge Rice come off the bench. Like, you have elite defenders in that group. You have 3 guys who can get you 20, 30 points a night if you need it. I think Texas gets through. And I hate it because
Texas hasn't had a 5-game winning streak this season that hasn't included a win over a Ken Palm sub 300 team. In order to make the Final Four, they're going to have to win 8 in a row.
They are also
such is the nature of the Big 12. Let me be negative for no reason.
Yeah. They're also only the only Big 12 team that didn't have a 3-game losing streak during the season. Every other Big 12 team had at least
the Big 12 was a gauntlet.
It was.
The Big 12 was a gauntlet.
It really was. I hate myself for trusting Texas because that's what you should not do, particularly when they have a different coach than the guy they started the year with. But
I'm in. I like Texas.
Yeah, I got to go with Texas.
You might talk me into it.
That leaves us with the West. Benefits UCLA. They're the 2 seed in the West with Kansas as the 1. It would have helped Kansas to be in the Midwest and be in Kansas City, but instead they got to go out west.
They also have Gonzaga as the 3 out west.
Also have Gonzaga. So Connor, we'll pull you in to lead us off with the West. What sticks out to you with this region?
It has the 12-5 upset I'm going to hammer like no other because VCU is going to destroy
Ace Baldwin, Aiden Mahaney, what a matchup.
VCU has one player who's relatively he is short in Ace Baldwin, and everyone else has length, and they can press, and they have the experience that St. Mary's.
Are they violent defensively?
I don't know if they're violent defensively, but they're playing pretty damn well.
They would scare Purdue.
Yeah. As a Gonzaga fan and a Gonzaga grad, I like the way this bracket shapes up for Gonzaga. I understand TCU is really good in the backcourt, but if there's one, there's always a first 4 team that goes on a run and then it bows out in the second weekend or the second round or whatever. But there's always one first 4 team that wins 2 games. They'll win their game in Dayton. They win the next game. ASU's
we know
that
what
team
Frankie
this year.
Collins does as an 11 seed.
ASU's that team this year.
Who do you think?
I think ASU beats TCU.
Okay.
They face Gonzaga. Gonzaga smokes them. UCLA's really good. UCLA's really good. I'm going to repeat that. They don't have Jalen Clark. Adembona might not be fully healthy, but UCLA proved in the Pac-12 tournament they're still really good at basketball. And Mick Cronin's system works regardless of who you put in there, at least defensively. That pod, I think, for UConn shapes up really nice. Really nice for UConn.
Yes.
The Big East had some really good pods sent their way. I'm just going to point that out.
Yes.
They really did. Like that first round matchup too against Rick Pitino.
Yeah.
Like Iona, I think, had the potential to pull an upset. That's a bad matchup for them, Lucas.
Yeah.
In my mind.
I agree. No, the Big East, for as little respect as it appeared to get at the bracket preview, got the best draw as possible for its seeds.
Yeah.
And I think this is
And
my
Xavier
bracket
getting a 3
that
seed,
goes
I think,
hectic.
exceeded my expectation.
What about this goes hectic? What goes nuts for you?
Well, I have 2 1 seeds out in the second round. Kansas is my second one. So I have 2 1 seeds to the Final Four, 2 1 seeds out in the second round. I don't think either the 1 or the 2 seed get to the Elite 8. So
Do you have Kansas losing to Arkansas or
Arkansas.
Illinois?
Illinois is not going to win a game.
Okay.
No, I have them losing to Arkansas. I have VCU beating St. Mary's. I obviously have Arizona State beating TCU. So I think it goes a little bit haywire in that first weekend. Right after I said Kansas has the easiest draw of any 1 seed, I put them out in the second round. So
Yeah. Whoops. Andy, is there a first-round matchup or maybe a draw that you really like in this region?
Well, the first round, it's actually not a first-round matchup. It's a first 4 matchup. Arizona State and Nevada, I love that. A couple fun things at play here. I mean, obviously, you talk about one of those first 4 teams who can go make a run, longer than they're supposed to be there, right? You've got a guy who's got some experience in that in Jared Lukas at Nevada, who was part of the Oregon State Elite 8 run a couple years ago. So if Lukas is going to mention Butler, I got to get my Oregon State.
Who could forget Oregon State's run? Who could forget that?
Who could forget about that? And if you did forget about it, then I won't let you. I will remind you. But no, the other fun wrinkle there is that Arizona State is playing, 2 of the key guys on their team are guys who started 48 combined games for Nevada last year in Warren Washington and Desmond Cambridge. So there's just, kind of some fun little things at play there, and guys who know each other well. I mean, obviously Arizona State, those players who were there before, they're going to know Jared Lukas from his time at Oregon State too. So there's just some very interesting little matchups going on there that I think will be very interesting. And what you get, Bobby Hurley and Steve Alford, I'll take that. That sounds like fun to me. So as far as first 4 matchups go, I'm looking forward to that one a lot more than I am Miss State and Pitt, if I may be so bold. I think that one will be fun. It speaks to my Western heart as well. But I mean, speaking of Mountain West teams, Boise State, I'm excited to see what that matchup against Northwestern ends up looking like. I think you could see you could end up in a kind of a shot-making, back and forth battle between Boo Buie and oh my God, Marcus Shaver. I think that would be very fun to kind of see a game going down to the wire with those guys kind of battling back and forth. I think that would be one of those kind of quintessential first-round NCAA tournament games. So I see that matchup, and I'm immediately drawn to that one as well as one that I want to make sure that I'm watching.
We know the officiating in that game, too, is going to be watched closely.
Look,
Perhaps
I'm not a big
strong.
blame the rest guy, so I'm not going to say anything about that afterwards, but I'm sure someone will.
Looking ahead, Andy, I'll stay with you. Who do you have coming out of the region?
God, I'm looking at, I had to look at what I wrote down just to even remember because I'm not quite sure. I had UConn coming out of the region. I think I feel good about that. I felt really good about it back in November. I've been trying to keep myself feeling good about that. I saw a little bit of this team at the in Portland at the Phil Knight Invitational or Legacy, whichever bracket they were in. I think that this UConn team, I don't know. I just I don't like Kansas on that side all that much. I think Kansas will get to that Sweet 16 game, but I think UConn will outsize them and beat them there. On the bottom half, I'm a little less sure whether it's Gonzaga or UCLA. I like both of those teams, but I don't know. I'm rolling with UConn here. I think Andre Jackson will be a big difference maker in a lot of games, and he's a guy that most teams don't have. I like UConn to get through there. Again, for now, we'll see.
Lukas, who wins it for you?
All right, I've gone 1 seed, 2 seed. It's time to get nuts.
Let's get
One
nuts.
team in this region beat Liberty on a neutral floor, one at Michigan State, one at Indiana, one at Nebraska, one at Wisconsin, one at Ohio State, and one at Rutgers. Let's go Northwestern.
Oh, no. Oh no!
Ooh.
Oh
I mean,
no!
if we're looking for a big time run, give me Boo Booey, give me Chase Audige. Let's see what happens. They could lose to Boise State in the first round. They could get blown out by Boise State in the first round. But I have done, and the odds that I actually put this in my bracket when I fill one out is extremely low. But I've gone 1-1-2. I need something to go nuts, and I just don't think I can take Arkansas to be that team. They haven't been consistent enough away from home. They haven't been consistent enough down the stretch with a healthy Nick Smith. I don't want to pick UConn since I'm already picking Marquette to the Final Four. That is way too much Big East. It leaves me very short of options for a Cinderella. And Northwestern's won away from home against good teams, NCAA tournament caliber teams. So why not?
Give Chris Collins a lifetime contract.
I was going to say, can you imagine?
Goodness gracious!
And let me tell you, I will say this is the most purple region in NCAA tournament history. Grand Canyon, TCU, Northwestern, it's loaded with purple here.
That is a lot of purple.
If you really want to toss in like a dark blue Nevada is pretty close.
Dark blue St. Mary's, dark blue Howard.
Dark blue, like a pretty bright blue for Boise, never mind.
Before we get out of this region, though, too, by the way, shouts to one of the coolest players in the tournament who may not last in the tournament very long, but Drew Pember and UNC Asheville.
Yes.
If you're looking for a reason to watch the UCLA UNC Asheville game, Drew Pember, big, what is 6'11", I think, and can step out, hit the three, block shots. I mean, just a unicorn of a player. So I am interested to see what he looks like on the big stage there against UCLA. I don't think the Bulldogs will pull off that upset or anything, but this is the time of year where you really get to see some of these mid-major stars who have been toiling in obscurity for 4 months now. You really get to finally see them on the big stage, and it's awesome.
Tennessee legend Drew Pember.
Yes, right. Of course, Tennessee legend Drew Pember.
Connor, you've talked about the chaos you have in this region. Who survives it?
Oh, I mean, the chaos only lasts the first round, or first weekend. I have UConn facing off against Gonzaga in my Elite Eight. And
wow,
Homer.
Those aren't two teams you like at all.
I have UConn advancing to the Final Four.
UConn,
Gonzaga, by the way, per Torvik, are the two best teams since February 1st. And
he had his whole argument loaded up to justify this pick.
And I have UConn advancing. I just think Andre Jackson is too good. I don't think Gonzaga has anybody that can match up with Jordan Hawkins. Adamas Sanogo is going to have a bit of a rough time on it because I think Gonzaga likely puts Anton Watson on him. But that means that you have Drew Timme defending Caravan or someone else, and I don't know if that's necessarily something that you want. So give me UConn advancing to the Final Four.
I have UConn in the Elite Eight, but I have them losing to UCLA. The reason why I still trust UCLA after the Jalen Clark injury is Amari Bailey, quite frankly. You mentioned, Connor, I think you mentioned before how their defense was so great in the Pac-12 tournament. Like, they're just Cronin system's excellent. You lose the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. Their defense didn't get better, but the numbers may have gotten better in that tournament. Clark being out means Amari Bailey has to play a big role, and he is a really talented offensive player. He's a 5-star prospect for a reason. He averaged 18 points per game in that tournament. You throw him in that mix with the steady hand Tiger Campbell and Jaime Jaquez are going to give you. I think UCLA is still dangerous. Like, I think losing Clark may hurt them at some point, probably in the Final Four. But to me, like, this tournament becomes an Amari Bailey coming out party almost, and keeps UCLA moving. But I certainly wouldn't be surprised if UConn made it out of here. Yeah. But I also thought UConn was going to win the Big East tournament with ease. I thought they would have been higher up in the Big East standings with ease. Like, there's something that about UConn just like isn't quite consistent enough for me. And I feel like UCLA is one of the most consistent teams in the country. So, all that's left is to name a national champion. We've kind of given our Final Four picks. So, Connor, I'll start with you. Can you summarize your Final Four picks?
My Final Four.
Just to remind everybody, and then who you have winning it
My
all?
Final Four is way out there. I have Alabama against Marquette and Houston against UConn.
Who wins it all?
I'm picking Alabama to beat Marquette. I'm picking UConn to beat Houston. Give me the Huskies, baby. They're winning it all.
There it is. There it is.
Yep. We've talked about it. Feels like 2011. This college basketball season. It would end the same way.
That Alabama UConn game is going to be.
Trust me, Brian. It does not feel like 2011.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Lucas.
Shoving Mac and Matt Howard are
I'm
not
so
walking
sorry.
through my door.
That Alabama UConn game would be fun. It's two of the top 5 teams in the country, in my opinion. They both turn the ball over a lot, but still have really good offenses. UConn's defense is just I think UConn's defense is good enough to survive Alabama. And Alabama's 3-point shooting is worse than UConn's. They shoot at a higher volume, I believe, but it's worse. And when you put them in a...
This is my section of floor from the 2011 Final Four.
Yeah. You put them in an NFL arena, or an NFL stadium, I should say. I don't know. I like whoever wins that Houston-UConn matchup to win the national championship. But I just think Houston at some point... I've been stubborn. I've had Houston as my national champion up until about 30 minutes ago, but I just can't pick them to win it all. So give me UConn.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of fall in the same place in that I have Houston and UConn on one side of that bracket, and I think that will determine the winner. I picked a different one. I am going with Houston. Jeez. God, I mean, I'm looking at my Final Four for that other pick, and this is truly the one that is going to, even what I have written down in my notes is different than what I said 20 minutes ago or whatever on this, because I changed my pick from Purdue to Marquette mid thought basically. So I think I've got Marquette and Baylor in that matchup, which, gosh. Am I putting Marquette in the national final? That seems crazy to me.
Dude, I know.
But yeah,
It feels weird.
It
But they're
does.
not good, but it feels
but
weird.
I'm just gonna go with it and say Houston over Marquette in the final game. Gosh, I don't know, man. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
the
let's
first time I went through the bracket, that's the final I ended up with.
Okay.
And I couldn't
about that, I guess.
I couldn't stomach it. I couldn't do it because it feels incorrect.
Not that now.
It feels incorrect.
Right. It does. It does. It feels like it's something that should have happened in 1979. It's not supposed to be this year's national championship game. It feels very old school to me.
It wouldn't surprise me though. Lucas, who do you have?
Yeah, so I'm going to pick Northwestern to the Final Four, and I'm still going to pick Alabama over UCLA in the championship. Can I do that? Can I do that?
Sure.
I'll go back and I'll put UCLA in my Final Four and be really boring, and I'll take Alabama over UCLA in the championship game.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's my bracket's a mess. So I have Texas
haven't
beating
filled one out
UCLA
yet.
on one side. Huh?
I haven't even filled one out yet. I'm just picking things off my head right now.
I've filled them out, crossed out. I got X's.
Well, I
everywhere.
spent my time after the bracket after the bracket reveal going through what I missed and what I can I immediately spend the next hour taking notes on what I can remember for next year's selection show.
Yeah, and
because I'll forget the numbers
good...
and I save all because eventually all those sites I can't just use Internet Archive and hope it's still going to be there in 360 days. So it's all my saving time for next year. I have not look. I barely look at the field until tomorrow morning.
It's so funny because during the whole season, everybody but bracketologists is just focused on like what's happening right now, and you're already thinking about March. And then Selection Sunday finally happens, and now everybody's thinking about the tournament. And you're like looking backwards,
Yeah,
I'm thinking about next January.
right.
well, that's why Lukas is the best bracketologist in the game.
Always
Ooh,
thinking
that's a
ahead.
stretch.
Yeah. So I have Texas beating UCLA. I have Memphis beating San Diego State.
Oh God, I forgot about that.
Yeah. Yep. And then I have Texas winning.
Texas beating them.
So I know I just said that like Houston and Marquette felt incorrect. Texas Memphis doesn't exactly feel more correct than that. So
Sounds pretty correct. I mean,
There's only two ways
In a
this can go. It could go like.
In a bracket
Go ahead, Lucas.
with a region where you can legitimately get Rick Barnes against Cal in the Elite Eight, you chose Memphis.
yeah, I chose. So there's also a scenario that I could very easily see where we get Marquette Texas and Shaka against
Shaka
Texas
battle.
in the championship game, which would be a lot of fun.
wow, yeah.
I actually kind of want to switch to that.
There's only two ways that Memphis Texas game can go. It could either be really exciting or like worse than Michigan Villanova from 2018 or 2017 or 2018. Like,
Yeah. I've talked myself into Memphis. I've talked
So
myself
who's
into this
Dante
Kendrick Davis run.
DiVincenzo in Memphis, Texas? Who's the Michael Jordan of Delaware?
Serge Jabari Rice.
Okay, it's actually a pretty good
So
shout.
I've talked myself into this Memphis run. I've talked myself into this with Kendrick Davis. They've been hurt a lot of the year. They don't have any like atrocious losses. Their worst losses were early in the season in like a 4-point loss to St. Louis. I don't think they've lost any game by double digits. Even
They almost
without
beat
like,
Houston without Kendrick.
right. Like it feels dumb, but I also am very confident in it.
So then
There's
let me
no
take-
such thing as a bracket prediction on Sunday night that doesn't sound dumb.
That's
They're
true.
all dumb.
Okay, Brian,
confirm.
let me ask you a question here. Now, you mentioned before that Kendrick Davis was sort of your Kemba Walker guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
For this tournament, and I'm sure that's part of why you had them in your final. Why not take it the logical next step and have Memphis winning it all? What's keeping you from locking
Texas is a much better team.
So Texas is back, is what you're saying.
Texas is. I don't think has won a championship in basketball before. Like Texas is
no.
here.
Right.
Texas is here.
Right.
Yeah. I've been a sucker for Texas roster for 2 years now.
so because Brian is picking
Flaw of mine.
Texas to win it all, everyone go hammer Colgate right now, this minute. If there's going to be a 15 or a 16 seed upset, Colgate's going to win that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's a Braden
this is what
Smith,
happens.
if there's a Braden Smith that's making the Sweet 16, I've learned from this podcast it's going to be Colgate's.
Right, yeah, I
No,
was
it'll be-
excited about 3 of the 4 Iowa teams being in the same pod. We got both Braden Smiths in the tournament. This
Yeah,
is
although
awesome.
legitimately, if you like Purdue and you've liked watching Braden Smith this year, enjoy Colgate. Braden Smith is going to win an upset in the next 4 years. It might not be this year. It probably won't be this year, but he's going to win a tournament game.
And here's the thing with Colgate is that Colgate is on a 20-1 run. I mean, granted, conference, but 20-1 run. They have the number 1 effective field goal percentage in the country, and they don't turn the ball over.
They gave Wisconsin a run for 35 minutes last
They're
year.
playing Texas. I mean, Texas, if they're hitting shots,
Brian,
not a chance.
well, Wisconsin, I heard that.
But if Texas goes through a slump against the number 1 shooting team in the country that doesn't turn the ball over, screw it. Colgate over Texas. Take that, Brian.
We're looking at it. There's a very real possibility that like Charleston beats San Diego State,
We've lost it.
FAU beats Memphis,
We're off the
Texas
rails.
doesn't make it out of the first weekend, and UCLA doesn't make it past the Sweet
This
16.
hangout has quickly turned into everybody has hung out to dry for next Thursday.
Yeah, Yep.
Hey.
So before we,
I don't know. I was just gonna say in our group chat right before the bracket came out, I said my like ridiculously specific bold prediction was that
Your Sean Paul prediction of
would
the year.
beat Arizona in the first round. If you want to stretch that to Colgate beating Texas or to Princeton beating Arizona, just clip this really well so that it sounds like I predicted that confidently if it happens.
how many years in a row has it been that a 15 seed has beaten a 2? Like 3 years in a row?
Is it really?
Gosh, is that right?
We had St. Peter's,
Yeah.
Oral Roberts, and then the tournament for that 2019, I think there was one.
Oh yeah, 2019. I keep forgetting. We just that's so long ago.
I know
because we didn't have 2020.
But I think it's been like multiple years in a row. 15, like a 15 seed has won. We've had 2 years in a row of 15 seeds in the Sweet 16.
That's crazy.
2019
All right,
had
Vermont, you're doing it.
no wait. I don't think it had a 15 that won. It had a lot of 13s and 12s.
No.
Okay.
Was that the Abilene Christian
So anyway,
year?
2 back-to-back years with a 15 seed in the Sweet 16. So, Colgate, guess it's you.
Well, it's Colgate or it's UCLA continues to not score. Like the 2 15 seeds I'm most confident. Or
It would not be the first time that Shaka Smart won a conference tournament and looked great and then fell on his face in the first round.
Bringing it all
There's
the way
Vermont,
back down.
there's Vermont sitting there. Program win.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that win could send. I'm not
I'll say
trying
this.
to put John.
I wanna
Beckman in
summarize-
the option yet, but
I want to summarize one thing that we haven't talked about at all in this podcast that I want to.
Okay.
Okay.
We have not mentioned anything positive about Kansas. And before Kansas fans get upset about that, we have talked about like every single other high-seeded team getting upset except Kansas.
Yeah.
Kansas, welcome to the Sweet 16, baby.
Kansas is one of those teams, and I mentioned this in my article that's up on heatchecksuv.com where I detail.
Hashtag plug season.
I think there's only 5 teams that can win the championship this year. And Kansas is one of them because in a year that everybody's been so inconsistent, everyone's gone through these ebbs and flows, ups and downs, Kansas hasn't. And
You're on like an 8-game winning streak if you take out games against Texas.
yeah, right. Like if things get wacky, really wacky, and like Northwestern's going to the Elite Eight,
Let's go Cats.
Kansas maintains a high level of play. They don't. Their best can be beaten by other good teams when they're at their best, but they're just like average level of play that they produce consistently is a lot higher than pretty much every team in the country.
Kansas to me they're a championship
The
contender.
most underdog 1 seed to make a Final Four.
They're the least inspiring of any. I mean, because at least Purdue is like you have clear flaws, and that's why we're not picking you. Kansas is just they
Rock
should
chalk
make
solid.
the Final Four, but I'm not inspired to pick them as much as a Texas or a Houston or a UCLA or a Marquette or a Alabama. Kansas is kind of just they're a ho-hum elite team, and that's not fun. So
one thing I will say to Kansas's benefit that might spur them onto a run, having your head coach had a health scare right before the tournament, and then getting him back. I don't know that can be a galvanizing type of event that really brings a team together, maybe in a way that they weren't together before, and one of those intangible things that you can't look up on KenPom or can't make sense of quantifiably in any way, but that just sort of keeps pushing a team forward in ways that are maybe unexplainable or just generally not what you expected to happen. So, if Kansas does make a run, I'm going to go ahead and say that that will be what is at least talked about later as the motivating factor behind it all, because those kind of rallying points. At this stage in the game, you're looking for anything like that you can, and not that you're exploiting something like this just for some extra motivation or anything, but like there's not huge margins between all of these teams right now, and so it's going to be some weird little intangible thing that pushes some team to the edge. And Kansas, Bill Self having a health scare right before the tournament could potentially be one. So I've got my eye on that as a potential little storyline going on for the tournament.
I'm with you on that for a different reason. And that I think it is hard for a defending national champion who earns the number 1 seed to keep a chip on their shoulder. But if you're going to point to one, not getting Kansas City, not getting the Midwest when they probably deserved it, like that might be the chip. It's hard to find one. Like that's why I like Marquette. God, do not clip that in a bitch ever. Do not clip that ever. That's part of why I like Marquette this year. Is because like they've had a chip on their shoulder since they got picked 9th in the Big East. It's been there the whole time. Kansas, I think, can get that chip. Not getting Kansas City.
Eli, go ahead and clip that.
That'd be
great.
No, I refuse.
That'll do it for this episode of Heat Check Hangout, your number one source for all things basketball college. Thank you guys for tuning in, staying to the end as we recap the bracket and look ahead to what's going to be a really, really fun next 3 weeks. And remember, as you're filling out your bracket in the coming days, it's probably going to do better than mine. So you have that going for you. Big thanks to Andy and Lukas for joining us here. For my co-host, Connor Hope, I'm Brian Ralph. Thank you guys for listening or watching, checking us on YouTube. We'll talk to you again next time.
Basketball, college. Basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa, basketball, college. Come on. Basketball, college. Basketball, college. Whoa, basketball, college.